Hello and welcome to the Fit and Fabulous podcast with your co-host Greg Theron.
And Gillian Davis. How everyone doing? So we are back again with another amazing episode, and this week we are joined by what I described as the sleep expert, Motty Varghese, who is a sleep physiologist for a sleep therapy clinic based in Dublin. Welcome along, Marty. Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much, Gillian. Thank you, Greg, for having me on your fabulous podcast.
Lots of
Yeah. So, the Fit and Fabulous, obviously our audience, we primarily kind of aim it at women who are over 40, over 50, that sort of age range is predominantly who we look after as well in terms of our own kind of businesses as well. So, But Marty, I'm just going to start off asking you a little bit about your background. So, a very short, brief history of
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
why sleep? How did you get into it?
Thank you for your lovely introduction. My name is Motty Varghese, and I'm originally from India. Been living and working in Dublin for the last 17 years. I graduated from India. I graduated in respiratory therapy and in the southern city called Chennai, or the old Madras, if you have ever heard about it. I'm originally from Kerala, one of the southernmost states. So I graduated from there, and I worked in India for a while, and then moved to Middle East and worked there before I moved to Dublin. And I worked in St. James's Hospital Dublin for 15 years. And my job in St. James's involved mostly working with patients with respiratory and sleep problems. So worked as a multidisciplinary team to help diagnosing respiratory problems and also mostly sleep breathing disorders like sleep apnea. And I underwent further training in cognitive behavioral therapy where I was working in James's, and also attended training programs in the Circadian and Neuroscience Institute. And I also did further training in Permanent School of Medicine under University of Pennsylvania, which is mostly on behavioral sleep medicine, which is a new and upcoming area of sleep medicine, which looks into the behavioral factors and the cognitive factors and assess them, and also to correct them if there is any wrong behaviors, cognitions that people would keep, like you see in situations like insomnia, to treat their sleep problems, primarily insomnia and also other circadian rhythm sleep disorders. And that's what I do in the clinic, which is a sleep therapy clinic. But I also do work with employers in optimizing employee sleep, because the productivity and the efficiency and the effectiveness of what they do and the quality of life in general can depend upon on how they sleep at night. So I do kind of work with employers, and a new project that we're looking at is working with cancer survivors in 2021, hopefully to optimize their sleep and also to address their anxiety about future, their health, and also about their sleep. So looking forward to it in the coming year.
Wow, that's quite a broad range. So, but so I get, one thing that we talk about, we know the importance of sleep. We know the importance of it for our health and optimal health. So do you think there's still like a gap in people actually taking it serious enough to realize that, how important it is?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of,
for granted maybe a little bit.
there has been a lot. Yeah, there has been a lot of focus and interest in sleep in the last few years. The Matthew Walker's book definitely did help to bring the focus on sleep, although, different people may have different opinion on it, whether it is helpful for people with sleep problems or not, but definitely did put the focus back on sleep. So I think there is also a lot of misconceptions about sleep, or how much sleep do we need, and what are the best ways to get good sleep, etc. So that definitely needs to be looked into and addressed. But I think it would be realistic to say that there is a gap between where we should be compared to where we are now.
Right. And what do you have in your experience? What would be maybe the biggest thing that's stopping people from maybe getting the best sleep, or?
Yes, about 10 to 15% of the population seems to sleep poorly, and the two most common sleep disorders are obstructive sleep apnea, as you may have heard or come across in the past, and also insomnia. These are the two most commonly reported sleep problems. One of them is primarily to do with the sleep quality. So obstructive sleep apnea, the sleep quality is compromised, but they don't normally report a big problem in falling asleep. But whereas in sleep conditions like insomnia, the sleep quantity is compromised. So the total sleep time can be reduced. And definitely both will have certain daytime effects in terms of tiredness and also excessive daytime sleepiness. So addressing both of those problems will have definitely, I mean, there will always be some people with insomnia and also having a component of obstructive apnea. Addressing those sleep issues can generally improve the sleep quality and quantity for people, and also how they feel during the daytime and the quality of life.
So something you just mentioned there was, how important is sleep for your health?
Sorry, Greg, can you repeat that again?
Yeah,
please?
sorry. Yeah, so how important is sleep for your health? So for your well-being.
Sleep has...
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sleep has different roles in our lives. I mean, you know, it's very safe to say that there isn't even one body system that doesn't benefit from a good night's sleep. Memory is one of them. You know, if you are sleeping very well, your ability to retain information and recall it at another point of time is very good. But whereas if you're sleeping very poorly, you may not be able to do that. Decision making, which is the thousands of decisions that we make every day in our lives, and sometimes it can be trivial, but at other times it can be very major life decisions or important decisions at work, and that can also be compromised if we are sleep deprived. There are also physical health factors that are affected by our sleep, you know, which is something that I don't really like to talk much about, because it can create anxiety among people who sleep poorly. But there are significant associations between heart diseases, stroke, or development of certain conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's. But people do worry about it a lot and start sleeping poorly when they're consuming those information. So we just need to be very careful about how you present it. But so yeah, it is. Sleep has a multifactorial beneficial role in our physical and mental health. Anxiety and depression is another area where people who sleep poorly tend to be more anxious. People who sleep poorly tend to report with more depressive symptoms. So it is very safe to say that sleep is very, very important to keep optimal physical and mental health.
Yeah. So just one thing you were talking there about, you know, that you hear a lot of times the ideal time of sleep is between 7 to 9 hours, and you know, how would you stand behind that, or would you
yes,
say
I mean,
that
it's
around
yeah, most people would hold on to the 8-hour sleep, try to get to 8 hours all the time, but sleep need is very variable between individuals.
Yeah.
The recommended sleep duration by American Academy of Sleep Medicine is over 7 hours, which is one of the largest bodies which make recommendations on different areas of sleep medicine. So the recommended sleep duration is over 7 hours. National Sleep Foundation in states, again, recommends 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So our sleep need is variable. We all don't need 8 hours of sleep. So when you're trying to get the 8 hours of sleep, and when you don't need 8 hours of sleep, you're going to be anxious about it. And couple that with all the information that we come across regarding dementia or Alzheimer's, and you couple those information, and you know, it can make you quite anxious that I'm not getting my 8 hours of sleep, and therefore I may develop dementia or Alzheimer's, or I have a history in my family, so I may have higher chances of getting those diseases. That's something that we need to move away from. But what's important is the not recommended sleep duration, which is less than 6 hours or over 10 hours. And if you're consistently sleeping less than 6 hours, that is something that need to be looked at, and why you were sleeping less than 3 hours, or are there behavioral factors that need to be optimized to improve your sleep quantity? Or are there cognitive factors that should be addressed to improve your sleep quality? Are you more anxious about sleep, or is it just that you're having poor sleep habits where you do not have enough sleep opportunity to get the required sleep? And there are people who sleep over 10 hours. I mean, when you come across some of the articles, you know, it would be presented as people who sleep longer have a shorter lifespan. So, you know, that's again misrepresented. I mean, there may be other reasons why someone would need over 10 hours of sleep. Their sleep quality may be compromised with sleep apnea or restless leg or environmental factors or other physiological or psychological factors. And hence they don't get good quality sleep, and their sleep need is met, and they end up sleeping long hours. Or when they end up sleeping long hours, sometimes it can be over 10 hours. But the primary reason that is leading to those long sleep hours need to be addressed. And it's not that because they sleep long hours, they live shorter.
Awesome.
Yeah. So just to answer your question, we all don't need 8 hours of sleep. Some of us may need 8.5 hours or 9 hours. Yeah. Some of us would need 7 hours or 7.5 hours. So it is up to ourselves to be self-aware and to actually look at how you feel during the daytime. After consistently sleeping good hours, you have to look at how you're feeling during daytime. And if you are sleeping 7 hours and if you're feeling great during the daytime, if you're not limiting any of your activities that you want to do, then you might be getting good quality sleep.
Makes sense. Totally makes sense. No, that makes sense. I think, like you said, we get trapped in this. You have to get this much sleep, but as you say, it's individual, isn't it?
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And I think one key word you used there was consistent sleep. I think
absolutely.
That's would you say that's a very key part of it as well?
Certainly, because we have to compare sleep as feeling hungry for sleep. The sleep drive, we have to have sufficient quantity of sleep drive before you hit the bed at night. If you do have enough sleep drive, we are able to fall asleep. So, I think the more people get familiarized with the term of sleep drive or sleepiness, it's very useful. So it's that appetite for sleep. It's that propensity to sleep, primarily determined by the number of wake hours you have before you go to bed at night. Okay. For instance, your appetite for food is determined by the number of hours without eating. So you have your breakfast at 8 a.m. and you have your lunch at 1 a.m. or 1 p.m. You got 5 hours between your meals and you feel hungry closer to 1 p.m. and then you can eat a good meal. But if you have had a big snack at 11 a.m., you're not hungry for your lunch at 1 p.m. Similarly, if you sleep in until 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. on a Saturday morning, and if you have no good reason to pay off a sleep debt like that, if you sleep in until 11 a.m. in the morning, and if you're attempting to sleep again at 11 p.m. at night, you only got 12 hours between waking up and going to bed again, and you don't have enough appetite for sleep or enough sleep drive, and you would find it difficult to fall asleep. And you do that consistently for 3 or 4 nights, and you get taking an hour or 2 hours to fall asleep. And then suddenly you become anxious about sleep. And then that anxiety is going to keep your sleeplessness going. It is going to perpetuate your sleep problem. So for that reason, the consistency, wake time, primarily wake time, because it's from that time onwards that you're building up your sleep drive or your sleepiness. So the consistent wake time is extremely important during the weekdays and the weekends, and something that went out the window during the lockdown period, which was good and bad, because people who were accumulating a sleep debt could actually pay off the sleep debt by sleeping in a little bit longer. And some of us are evening type people, so they could actually wake up at a later time. But it is important for us to remember that we need a consistent wake time. And, when things return to normal, as it is doing gradually returning to normal, we have to be able to go back to our original wake time without much difficulty. So a consistent wake time is much more important than a consistent bedtime. But we have to have a reasonably consistent bedtime with minor changes. 15 minutes or 20 minutes here or there, it's probably okay, but not by a couple of hours.
I think that's very important. Sorry, Greg, I was just going to say, because it's now back to school, the kids are having to, it was funny, I literally had this conversation yesterday with my mum and my family, my nieces they're starting back to school today, like, oh, you'll have to get to bed early tonight. And I was like, no, it's too late, you needed to get up early in the morning.
Interesting factor, actually, because another factor that we also need to focus on is our light exposure. So timely light exposure in the morning and also limiting your light exposure in the evening is extremely important for us to prepare ourselves for bed. the light exposure in the morning signal to our body that it is morning time and the sun has risen. You really have to think about the cavemen in the Stone Age, where we had no artificial source of light. He went to bed, well, I should be saying bed, but his sleep environment, when the sun set, he felt sleepy with the natural production of melatonin and the sleep hormones and other factors that was helping to prepare for bedtime. And he walked to the sunrise and exposed himself to bright natural sunlight first thing in the morning, which inhibited the melatonin production and also increased his alert levels. And he went on with his day, and the same thing repeated again. So it is extremely important you look at our light exposure these days, and there is a huge amount of artificial light exposure, something that we need to be very careful about. Some of us are also evening type people. Our chronotype can be evening type, or we may have evening tendencies where we would have a tendency to go to bed later and wake up later. It's winter months in September, October, November, December with reduced sunlight in the morning. So we do really need to have to focus on our light exposure in the morning to signal to our body. And that's how our body will learn what's outside. So the first ray of light that goes into your eyes indicates to our body that, okay, it is morning time. The sun has risen. It is morning time. But imagine a situation where we are in our bedroom until 10 in the morning, and it's only at 10 o'clock, you're opening your eyes or you're opening your windows and blinds. And that's the time when the light is going into our eyes, signaling to our master body clock that it is morning time. So you do that. When you're doing that consistently, that will lead to a dysynchrony, and that can lead to other sleep difficulties and other problems in general as well.
Yeah.
So this is where people stay up late watching TV. Is that a big problem for stopping people?
Yeah, no. Yeah, so we should limit light exposure for 2 hours, and sometimes you would hear 1 hour, but 2 hours would be ideal if you can, 2 hours before our bedtime, because we do have a point called DLMO, which stands for dim light melatonin onset. So if someone typically naturally falls asleep at 11 p.m., his DLMO is 2 hours prior to that, which is 9 p.m. And the melatonin production kind of starts around that time from 9, and it peaks in about 2 hours, which will help us to fall asleep. And melatonin plays a bigger role in falling asleep rather than maintaining sleep, but also a role in maintaining sleep as well. So we need to be mindful of the fact to avoid bright light for 2 hours before bedtime. Now, watching TV is okay because TV is at a distance. The closer the light source is to our face, the more light falls on our retina, and it will send a message to our master body clock. So the farther the light source, the better. So TV is at a distance. Whereas if you're using a handheld device like your smartphone or an iPad or a laptop or a Kindle, again, people ask questions about that it is dim light. But it is best to avoid any light closer to our face for 2 hours before bedtime. We could also turn down the overhead lights off in the sitting room if you are spending time in the sitting room, and have a night lamp or floor lamp turned on. So just make sure that there isn't enough light. There isn't a lot of bright light in the environment for 2 hours before our bedtime. It just kind of helps to calm our mind, helps to prepare ourselves for our sleep.
Yeah. It's so big important. And are there other factors as well then that come into having optimal night sleep? So we touched on there about light,
yes,
consistent getting up and
light and consistent wake time. Yes, yeah. So there are also we should try and keep our bedroom dark. Again, dark for the same reason, quiet, because environmental factors like light, noise, and temperature can affect our quality of sleep. As well as the quantity of sleep. So we should keep our bedroom as dark as we can, as quiet as we can, as cool as we can. We should also try and avoid bright light exposure for 2 hours before bedtime. Mm-hmm. Keep an eye on the caffeine intake. Before I go into the caffeine part, some people, you may hear someone saying that I do look at my phone before my bed, it doesn't affect my sleep. Now, it's important for us to be self-aware as well, because we are all different. Some of us may be more light sensitive than someone else. There was an interesting research done in Monash University in Australia by Dr. Sean Kane, who proved that we are differently sensitive to light. So some of us may be more sensitive compared to someone else. So, but as a general rule, it's best to avoid bright light for 2 hours before bedtime. So the onus is on individuals to actually look at, okay, did I use the phone last night, and did I sleep well or did I sleep poorly? And the caffeine intake is another factor. Caffeine is seen in, caffeine molecules are present in coffee, tea, soft drinks, chocolate, etc. The caffeine, remember we spoke about sleep drive earlier. Sleep drive is also the accumulation of a chemical called adenosine in our brain. Every hour we stay awake, we're producing this chemical adenosine, and the more adenosine we have, the sleepier we are. We feel sleepy when the adenosine gets attached to the adenosine receptor. But if we have caffeine in our system, it gets attached to the adenosine receptor and doesn't give adenosine a chance to do that and for us to feel sleepy. So when caffeine does that, we feel alert and awake, and sometimes in certain cases, if you're too sensitive to caffeine, we can feel jittery as well. So it takes 8 hours for the caffeine molecule to go away from the adenosine receptor so that adenosine has a chance to get attached there. So again, we can be differently sensitive to caffeine as well. So some people may be able to drink a coffee or a cup of tea after dinner and still sleep normally. But again, if those individuals, if they leave it for 8 hours, then see whether that makes a difference. Whether do you sleep better, or do you fall asleep quicker, or is your sleep quality better when you haven't taken caffeine for 8 hours? Or for people who sleep poorly, they can also try the same, limit the caffeine usage for 8 hours before the bedtime and see whether that makes a difference. So again, we are differently sensitive to caffeine, just as how we are sensitive to light. So that's another factor to consider.
Yeah.
Right.
So there you go, people. Something to try.
Yeah.
Even if you think you're having a good night's sleep, it could still be improved. Just have a little experiment.
Exactly.
And
Yes, it's all about the self-awareness. Yeah, you make the change
and chocolate
and
and all those other things as well. Marty, sorry to interrupt you.
Certainly. Yeah. Mealtime is another factor. Supper, what time are you eating? The general advice would be to try and leave 2 to 3 hours, ideally, between the last bite of food and your bedtime. So the earlier a meal is better. And if you really want a snack, at least leave 2 to 3 hours before, have it 2 to 3 hours before the bedtime. Because gastroesophageal reflex is a common complaint that you would hear about, and eating and digesting food closer to bedtime will also increase your body temperature. And an increased body temperature is not good for our sleep. So is vigorously exercising closer to bedtime. A gentle walk in the evening is fine. Within 2 or 3 hours of bedtime, even that is fine. But mostly exercising closer to our bedtime will increase our body temperature. Having a hot shower just before going to bed is also going to increase our body temperature. So we have to focus on getting our body temperature down so that it can improve our sleep. Digestion, as we mentioned, is going to increase our body temperature. Think of your stomach as a furnace. You're putting food into it, and it has to work harder to digest that food, and it is going to create heat. And also the factor that your stomach kind of slows down at a certain time in the evening. Once that slows down and then you instill food into it, you're calling it for work over time, and then it is not happy to do that. It produces a lot of gastric juice. The process itself will produce a lot of body heat. The core temperature will go up. And also, as we produce a lot of gastric juices, that gastric juices have a tendency to come up our food pipe. Now, if you've ever noticed, we don't produce saliva at nighttime, but whereas we produce a lot of saliva during the daytime. Now, one of the roles of the saliva is that when it goes down your food pipe, it neutralizes the gastric acid that is coming out, right? The gastric juices that's coming up. But in the absence of enough saliva to do that, to neutralize the gastric acid that's coming up your food pipe, we can get heartburn.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
That's
and that can affect our quality of sleep as well. Now, even with people with reflux disease, it's more bothersome when it is happening at night than during daytime. So that's just another factor that we have to be aware of as well.
Wow. I think you just blew my mind. I never thought about saliva and how much I produce at certain times of the day. I've never really, that's big.
So
part of it.
so it's interesting. Yeah, so it's interesting that everything has a circadian component.
Yeah.
All the functions that take place in our body has a circadian component attached to it, and it is all controlled by our master body clock. Same as sleep and wakefulness. You feel sleepy at a certain time at night, and you feel awake during the daytime. There are also, when you look at the different chronotypes, that's genetically coded for some people to be morning type. About 25% of the population is morning type, 25% is evening type, and 50% is about, falls into the intermediate, whether neither morning nor evening, which I think is a better thing. But some people may also have morning tendencies and evening tendencies, So just cerebral production is just one of those factors that may have a circadian component.
So I've got a question about shift patterns and how they have an impact on people's sleep and tiredness. And what can they do if you work shift patterns to ensure you're getting good sleep?
Yeah, so when it comes to shift work, the evening chronotype individuals would cope better with shift work. So let's say an evening chronotype person would have a normal bedtime of 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. and he starts a shift at 8 p.m. So he's okay to work 5 to 6 hours without having any difficulty at all. Mm-hmm. And he only needs to struggle for another 4 hours or 5 hours, and then if the evening type person goes to bed at 2 a.m. and has a tendency to wake up at 8 a.m., he's actually getting home at around 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. And so his typical sleep period is still not over. So he can initiate sleep without much difficulty. And with the sleep drive that was built up while he was awake at night, he could sleep longer hours without significant difficulty when you compare that to a morning type person. A morning type person may have a tendency to go to bed at 9 p.m. or between 9 and 10 and wake up at 5 or 6 in the morning. Right? And so morning type people tend to struggle more with shift work. So one of the factors that we should be focusing on while working shift is to reshape the pattern of our light exposure to make sure that we adapt better to shift work. So it is light that indicates to our body whether it is daytime or nighttime. So by signaling to our body with the right amount of light at the right time, we could reshape our sleep wake patterns to a certain extent. Now, it's never going to be ideal. It's never going to be ideal like sleeping at night and staying awake during daytime, but it is possible to make certain adjustments to a certain extent.
Awesome.
So when someone wakes up after their shift work, after their sleep during daytime, following a night shift, they have to focus on more light exposure. And that's going to indicate to their body that it is it is morning time, or it is time to stay awake and alert. So it is the first couple of shifts that they would find difficult. And it is also important for them to introduce a nap during work hours. Right. And for a morning type person, if he wakes up much earlier during the day, they will have to look at having a long nap before they start their work.
Right. Makes sense.
Right. Yeah. So also, and also very, very important is to avoid bright light exposure or primarily blue light exposure when they finish their shift.
So don't get
Exactly. Yeah, you have to look at both ends. Yeah. So more light in the evening and less light in the morning. So less light in the morning, which means you're kind of signaling to your body that, okay, you need to optimize the sleep hormone levels as much as you can so that you can initiate sleep. So try and avoid blue light exposures. Don't look at your phone on the way home if you are if you are taking public transport, if you are commuting using public transport, try and avoid bright light exposure by using sunglasses while driving home. Now that is, you need to kind of take your safety into concern as well. If you're very sleepy as you're leaving work, maybe take a short nap before you leave work. And if you think it makes you very sleepy, do not use a sunglass. But once you get home, keep your light levels down. Use a blue light blocking glasses to avoid blue light from entering your eyes, which would signal to your body that it is daytime and it is time to stay awake. And get to bed as quick as you can and try not to stay awake for 1 or 2 hours. Get home, get ready, have a small breakfast and get to bed straight away. So your natural melatonin production may finish by 8 or 8:30 or 9 in the morning, depending on your depending on the pattern of your melatonin production based on your chronotype. So make the most of the last bit of melatonin that's in your system by trying to eliminate light exposure, and also by getting to bed as quick as we can.
Perfect. Thanks.
I wanted to ask you a little more, because you're talking about chronotypes there, Marty.
Yes. Yeah.
So is it like, we talk about early birds, if you're an early bird or a night lark.
Yeah.
Is that a clear distinction with people, or is everybody, even if you think you're an early bird, but you still have tendencies to be more nighttime, or
Yes, yeah, there's actually a questionnaire called a morningness eveningness questionnaire, where you can determine whether a person is a morning type or an evening type. Now, the strong morning types and the strong evening types, they would clearly know that they're a morning type or an evening type. And the intermediate people can have certain tendencies, whether they may be more closer to the evening type, or sometimes they're more closer to the morning type. So that's possible too. So they may not be a typical evening or morning type, but they may maintain certain tendencies towards an evening type. So for example, if somebody has a project to finish and they're working towards a very tight deadline, and if they have something to finish, and if you prefer to stay awake at night and finish that work, that might be an indication that the person may have small eveningness than morningness, whereas a morning type person may prefer to wake up early in the morning and work on the project before they get their day started. So there is that distinction as well.
So it wouldn't be also morning genders or anything, no? Or would there be, is there more women or men prefer one type over the other?
Okay.
Or would it be?
Yeah, that's actually a good question. Now, I haven't looked into it, to be honest. I'm sure there is some research which points to that, but through my own work, I've seen more women reporting morningness compared to men. Now, look, I can say it's just my casual observation. Just while we're talking about chronotype, it's also important for us to have that, again, awareness whether we are an evening type or morning type, because our most productive time would also change depending on our chronotype. A morning type person can actually wake up at 5:30, 6 in the morning and put in a couple of hours work before anybody is awake, and they can be very productive in the morning time as well. More productive, that's probably their best time of the day to put in work. So we also have to look at, when do we feel better during our daytime. Evening type people can be a little bit sluggish in the morning because they're only waking up at around 9:30 or 10 if their circumstances allow them to do so. And their morning is not the best, but they become more alert and more productive in the afternoon. So it is important for employers to know that factor, because and to have that flexibility to offer to their employees, because it's best for you to have an evening type person in the office when we go back to normal working patterns. If it's better for you to have an evening type person at 10 or 10:30 in the morning, and if you allow him to work until 5:30 or 6 in the evening, rather than dragging him out of his bed at 8 in the morning, getting him to bring the office at 7:30 or 9 in the morning when he's least productive. but his productivity time can be better later in the evening. Likewise, morning type people.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I had a question and now it's gone because I was so absorbed in what you're saying. I'm like, I need to ask that question. So does the typical 9 to 5 working day, has that been detrimental to people's health, to people's sleep? Because I think what happens is people work, it's supposed to be 9 till 5, but they'll generally work 9 till 6, 6:30. Then they'll get home and so they've got to travel potentially. Then they've got to sort the kids out for dinner. Then they want wind down time, which means on Netflix till 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Then it becomes sleep.
Yeah.
So, I guess I'm asking is, does the typical work day allow for optimal sleep?
Yeah. I wouldn't say it is detrimental, but I think there is more value in looking at individual chronotypes and allowing flexibility for those who need it. But then again, we also, we are under pressure from various factors. We also have to remember that, your kids are home, your partner is home from work at around 5 o'clock, and then, you do need that quality time with the family as well. So it's about prioritizing as well and giving people that flexibility. So if somebody is happy to put in a couple of hours of work in the evening when they get home, and if the employer is happy to offer that to him, you're still getting the work done, and also catering to individual needs of their employees. And I think a lot of workplaces are moving towards more flexible working style, which is great. And look, the lockdown has definitely been an eye opener for a lot of workplaces and a lot of individuals as well to work at their best time.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've heard. People have just been taking more frequent breaks, maybe not just sitting down solidly for sitting in and as they would in the office, but they're actually maybe do a little bit here, stop for a bit, maybe come back later in the afternoon, and do a little bit at night time. So just to to work.
Of course, there are downsides. There are downsides. Lots of downsides of working from home. While you're trying to take care of different responsibilities with kids and all of that, but there are definitely advantages. Yeah.
So, how do you talked earlier about quality of sleep? So, I've got a couple of clients who they can get to sleep, but they get disturbed sleep through the night. Toilet, kind of midnight insomnia. And just general tossing and turning. So is there anything that they can do to improve the quality of sleep?
Okay. Yeah. So when you're looking at the quality of sleep, we have to consider a few factors. The first one being environmental factors. The light level in the bedroom, the noise level, the temperature, which may be a big problem for a lot of your clients, women in that particular age group of 40 to 50. So we have to pay attention to the environmental factors, or if your bed partner snores, if your bed partner has some sort of sleep movement disorders like restless legs or anything like that, you do need to pay attention to that. You have to pay attention to your mattress. You have to pay attention to your pillow. You have to pay attention to any pain in your body, which may also be affecting the quality of your sleep. Then you also have to look at, once that is all optimized, if they're all good, you have to also look at the other physiological factors like obstructive sleep apnea, where a person snores because their throat muscles relax when they are sleeping at night. And when the throat muscles are relaxed, all the body muscles relax when we sleep at night. And when these throat muscles relax, and if you are predisposed to have sleep apnea with reduced oropharyngeal space at the back of your throat, your air passage is narrowed. So there is the air is moving through a narrowed air passage, which creates a sound. That's what you hear snoring. But if you keep on snoring, you create a negative pressure in your throat, and the throat will have a further tendency to close in further. And then you're not getting enough moving into your lungs, and which can lead to a drop in your oxygen levels or a little arousal in your brain. It's when you get those when you get too many of those arousals, that's when your sleep quality is compromised, because those arousals stop the progression of sleep into nice, deeper, refreshing stages of sleep.
Okay.
Right. So, for instance, sleep happens in cycles, and each cycle has different stages in it: stage 1, stage 2, 3, and also REM sleep. So, stage 3 sleep is very physically refreshing, and the REM sleep is more mentally refreshing. So, when you in severe sleep apnea, you do not get to spend enough time in your stage 3 sleep, or delta sleep as we call it, or the REM sleep, and for that reason you do not feel physically refreshed or mentally refreshed when you wake up in the morning. So that's how the poor sleep quality affects us. So obstructive sleep apnea is one reason where our sleep quality is compromised. Restless legs, a lot of people would report restless legs, and can be another reason why the sleep quality is compromised. Then there are also psychological factors like anxiety and stress, that can also affect our sleep quality. So we need to kind of focus on relaxing for 2 hours before our bedtime. We have to do some journaling in the late afternoon or early evening and put away all our worries and anxieties. You need to put your day to bed before you go to bed at night. Right. So you have to sort out all those worries and anxieties. And people who worry tend to have a lot of irrational worries. So we have to look for evidences to support our worry. Well, with worries, we got 2 options to start with. You could mindlessly worry about it, or you could rationalize it and see whether there's any point in worrying about the particular factor. So when you worry, we're worrying that something's going to happen ultimately. So you have to look at, do I have enough evidence to support that it's going to happen? So you're challenging your thoughts. So if you do have enough evidence to support your worries, then it's a rational worry. If you don't have enough evidence to support your worry, then it's an irrational worry. You really have to put away the irrational worries, right? And then you have to also look at the controllables. What are the controllables? Or you have to look at the percentage of chances it is going to happen with rational worries. Not all of them are 100%. Some of them can be 100, some of them be 80 or 50 or less even. Then you have to look at controllables. What can I do to make sure that it doesn't happen, right? Let's take if you look at the COVID example, washing your hands, using face masks, using hand sanitizers. These are all controllables.
Yeah.
Instead of worrying, I'm going to get COVID because I have to do some trips outside, right? So that's another factor. And then you also have to look at the acceptance piece. If it is to happen, what can I do to limit the damage? Do I have my GP's phone number to hand? Do I know where the nearest hospital is? Do I know what the treatment options are available for me? So we have to be engaged in that step-by-step process while we're doing the journaling, trying to put our day to bed. So generally, stress and anxiety, when you have a stressful factor, when we have anxiety, we are having that fight or flight response, which produce a lot of stress hormones, which helps us to deal with the stressful factor. Now, imagine having that fight or flight response closer to our bedtime, right? Closer to bedtime is actually the most quietest time of the day, and that's when we start thinking about all these problems. And we start strategizing, we try to strategize, which will naturally lead to elevated stress hormone levels, which makes us more alert. And closer to bedtime, the last thing that we need is alertness. What we need is sleepiness. So that mental process can actually override a physical process of sleepiness, and sleep drive. So we do really have to make a conscious effort to deal with those thoughts, anxieties, and stressful factors. Sometime in the late afternoon or early evening.
Very cool. I like that.
So those are the factors. To summarize, those are the factors. Environmental factors, there may be loads of different factors, but to name a few would be the environmental factors, the physiological factors like sleep disorders, and also the psychological factors that we need to focus on to ensure the quality of our sleep.
Definitely the one line from that is, put your day to bed before you go to bed. That is,
exactly. I like that. Before you go to bed at night.
Yeah. Like that. Well, like those little phrases, they're just easy easy message. They just hit home, don't
Yes.
they? So yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I think definitely one thing, you know, insomnia is something that we hear a lot. And like you mentioned there, Molly, you know, with women that we work with, obviously they're at that perimenopause, menopausal stage of life that they will get lots of hormonal fluctuations that will cause body temperature to rise during the night predominantly, and really disturb the sleep. So do you have any sort of, I suppose, anything that would help those women really?
Yes.
Or
yes.
what happens if you do have you do wake up in the middle of the night? What would be your advice then to help you to get back to sleep really?
Yes. Yeah. So as you rightly said, the sleep problems in that age group when women are going through their menopause is certainly driven by the hormonal changes. You know, the drop in levels of their estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone hormones. So we do, so that can act as a precipitating factor. So what we need to be careful about is that we shouldn't get anxious about it, because once you get anxious about sleep and waking up at night and difficulty getting back to sleep, that's going to perpetuate our sleepless nights, and then that becomes a more consistent pattern of waking up at night finding it difficult to go back to sleep. You definitely have to look at managing temperature changes, which is, you know, very common sense methods like, you know, aerate your bedroom for half an hour before you go into bed at night. Use the right clothing, use the right duvet to make sure that, you know, that you're not warm at night. You could also consider using certain mattress coolers, which may be another method to keep your sleeping surface cool. Which is kind of becoming more and more popular these days. And then when you wake up at night, we need to be mindful of our bed-sleep association. The stronger we keep the bed-sleep association, the bigger are our chances of returning to sleep without much difficulty. So if you wake up at night, when we go to bed at night as well, our first opportunity to fall asleep is in the first 20 minutes. If you don't fall asleep in the first 20 minutes, we get frustrated, we get stressed, we release stress hormones, which makes us awake, alert, and anxious, and then sleep doesn't happen. Then it's going to take longer and longer to fall asleep. So the best thing to do is, without looking at the clock or without watching time, at the first sign of frustration, oh, here we go another night, I'm not going back to sleep, or I'm not falling asleep. When you get that thought in your mind, get up and leave the bedroom for 30 minutes. And come back. You could go, make sure that you don't expose yourself to bright light. Make sure you don't go and make a cup of tea or look at your phone. Instead, you know, watch TV, read a book, listen to music, do something very relaxing, and return to bed in about half an hour. And now that's not very regimental. If you felt sleepy in 25 minutes, get up and go to bed. If you didn't feel sleepy in half an hour, just wait another 5 or 10 minutes and then go to bed. Now, it helps us in 3 different ways. One, it helps to strengthen the bed-sleep association. Right? Bed, you're not staying awake in bed for an hour or an hour and a half, because when you do that, your sleep efficiency goes down. You're spending long time in bed, your sleep opportunity is 8 hours, and you're only sleeping 6 of it. So your sleep efficiency is low. So when you keep it strong, when you're not staying awake in bed, you strengthen the bed-sleep association, which and that's when the body will start bed as a place to be asleep and not resting and not being awake. And it reduces your anxiety about sleep. If you decide to stay in bed, you'll be thinking, will I fall asleep? What if I don't? I have a meeting tomorrow. Or I'm going to be tired. I'm going to bring the kids to school, so I can't sleep in the morning. You know, all of those thoughts, we become more and more anxious about it. The more anxious you are, the less are your chances of returning to sleep. But if you get up and leave the bedroom, turn the telly on, you're distracting yourself. Right? Instead of thinking about sleep and getting anxious about sleep, you're refocusing on something else, right? And that will help too. The third is, when you come back in half an hour, you get a new opportunity to fall asleep. You're starting all over again. You're resetting the process. And that always helps too. So yeah, it strengthens the bed-sleep association, which is extremely important, reduces the anxiety about sleep, and also get a new opportunity when you come back in half an hour. And, you know, so that can be done when you first go to bed, and when some people would have sleep onset insomnia where they find it difficult to fall asleep when they go to bed at night. where someone else would have maintenance insomnia, where they wake up at night and find it hard to go back to sleep. So it can be done in both those instances, and it's quite a useful thing to strengthen the bed sleep association to maintain good sleep patterns.
So we want to associate lying in bed with going to sleep, not staying awake and being frustrated.
And for the same reason, people are advised to not to work in bed, not to read in bed. Well, reading is okay, probably for 10 or 15 minutes for a short period of time. You know, some people would see reading as a very relaxing activity as well. If that helps them to, it's not about the rigidity of the rules, it's about what helps you. So if it helps you to read for 10 or 15 minutes to combine and then turn the lights off, it's fine. But not to use bed as a place to read for a longer period of time or to watch TV. You know, so so it's important to keep the bed sleep association strong. Yeah.
Cool, absolutely. So yeah, I think it's fascinating just to have that, and you know, you can see it's just the impact then, and you know, having those bouts of sleep, and like you say, it's not to it's to disassociate anxiety with that, isn't it? Is to
yes,
to really,
yeah. And we would also have that tendency to be anxious about sleep. People with insomnia definitely would try to make sleep happen. And I think it is very, very important for us to remind them, you can't make sleep happen. Sleep is the result of a natural physical process, right? You can't make yourself hungry. You get hungry when you go a certain number of hours without food. You get thirsty when you don't drink enough water, when you go a certain number of hours without water. Likewise, you get sleepy when you go a certain number of hours without sleep.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a result of a natural physical process. So you don't need to try to make it happen. In fact, it will happen by itself if you don't make an effort to make it happen. So our sleep related effort has to come down as well. And that's by accepting the fact that I can't make sleep happen, so I'm not going to try, which itself will relax a person. Now, the one thing that I wanted to mention earlier was to do with remember when we were talking about the good sleep behaviors or good sleep habits to keep? Now, individuals with insomnia would have a tendency to approach them as safety behaviors. You know, you're not sleeping well, you're on the internet and look for good sleep habits, and then you find out all the good sleep habits, and they put them in place very diligently, and then they look for the results, and then the results are not there, and they're still sleeping poorly. We need to be very careful about that. Safety behaviors are behaviors we adopt to stop the worst from happening. For someone with insomnia, the worst is a poor night's sleep. So they put certain behaviors in place to make sure that good sleep happens. So we need to be careful with that as well. So what we do is important, but the approach that we keep is very important as well. We're not trying to make sleep happen, but we're just trying to facilitate the process. We're trying to help it.
Yeah.
That's extremely important.
That's
where you, not adding more pressure to it as opposed to, you know, alleviate.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because when you believe that when you believe that, okay, if I keep all these habits A, B, C, and D, I'm going to get E, and when you don't get E, you're going to be very frustrated, and that's adding fuel to the problem, right? So we have to be mindful about sleep as well. Every night is a new night. You know, we're all used to the premise, familiar with the premise of every day is a new day, every moment is a new moment. Every night is a new night as well. So you do have all the potential to get a great night's sleep tonight and every night. Just focus on a couple of very important factors. Make sure you have a consistent bedtime and wake time, which means you have enough sleep drive built up before you go to bed at night. Reduce your light exposure for a couple of hours before your bedtime, which will enhance the melatonin levels and optimize your melatonin levels. And your master body clock here can always, in your brain, can always make you sleepy at a certain time. You just have to follow the body's natural cues.
Yeah.
Awesome.
To go to bed at that time. Yeah.
Awesome.
I just have one last question to ask you, Marty.
Sure.
One thing that comes up is the kind of common phrase, having a nightcap. Do you think nightcaps are, again, you know, just based on what you talked about, you know, sensitivity to light and caffeine, is it the same then?
Yeah.
If people want to have a little nightcap and have a bit of alcohol at nighttime, help them relax.
Yeah, look, again, it all depends on how much you drink and how often you drink. And also have the awareness of how it's going to affect my sleep if I have a few drinks. Now, leave it for 3 hours before you, the last drink should be, not be within 3 hours of your bedtime. So leave 3 hours before. It may help you to fall asleep, but do not ever use it as a sleep medication, as a sleep aid, I should say. So, because you may fall asleep quicker, but you wake up at night and find it hard to go back to sleep. Right? Once it is metabolized, you wake up, and that can be 3 a.m. or 4 a.m. and find it hard to go back to sleep. But look, every now and then, and we're happy to pay the price. It's probably okay,
Just be aware of the consequences.
Exactly. Just be aware of the consequence and do the best you can. Leave it for 3 hours before your bedtime.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not realistic to say you shouldn't drink at all. Right. So everybody should take their own individual responsibility to decide on how much they drink and how often they drink, and to know how it can affect your sleep, and then make an informed decision.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you. That's been pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about your work or what you do? Do you have a website?
Yes. So I run this clinic in St. James's Private Clinic in Dublin, and my website is sleeptherapy.ie. Mm-hmm. And if anybody is looking at just an online sleep course, 45 minutes an hour, you could access a short sleep course on the website deltasleep.ie. It's a sleep course called Optimizing Sleep for Health and Productivity. If you're just looking for good techniques or useful information on how to optimize your sleep, there is that. There's also another course for night shift workers to optimize sleep while working night shift. They both are available on deltasleep.ie. But individuals with insomnia are seen in sleep therapy clinic. Currently, all therapy sessions are done online.
Yeah.
Because of the COVID restrictions, which is working very, very well actually. Yeah. So. So there it is.
Yeah. Well, we'd be sure to, anyone that we know is struggling with sleep or having issues, we'll point them in your direction.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It's been awesome.
Thanks very much. Yeah. I had
Okay.
pleasure. So I hope everyone's got something from that. We're just going to wrap up now and say a big thank you to Motty again for joining us today, and I hope you find it worthwhile.
Okay. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Take care.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Hey, so anyone listening, if you're listening and you enjoyed that, then obviously subscribe and share this with friends. I think it was a very, very valuable episode. I think so anyway.
Do go off there. So yeah, absolutely. Tune in, and like you said, leave a review as well if you're listening on iTunes. Just let us know what you think, whether you want some more questions, or get in touch with Marty, and we'll make sure that he finds out the questions for you. So
awesome. All right. So we'll see you in the next episode.
Yeah. Bye.